while you do that, I'll just explain.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just to clarify some of the stuff that Karen was saying. So I'm on the board of NOFA New Jersey, so Northeast Organic Farming Association, and on the board of Friends of Hopewell Valley, everybody, Friends of Hopewell Valley officers. And also on the steering team of North RC&D's Regenerative Farming Network. And I am on governance and admin with the Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance. So that organization, we'll talk more about them. They specialize, or I say they, but I'm one of the founding members. We specialize, we've been going up about 4 years now. Not even 4, about three, almost 4 years, and we just became international. But we specialize in preserving culturally relevant seed and food, especially from war-torn areas. And so I do a lot of that. I'm a mentor with the Princeton University Seed Farm. So that's you saying working with the Princeton students. I've been doing that for a few years, as well as mentoring for other youth programs like the Outdoor Equity Alliance, which brings in young people from all over the region, particularly focusing on urban sectors, teaching young people about careers in the green space. So that particular program, Renata Barnes built and ran that program. She's now starting a new organization called Outdoors on Purpose. And so I will be working with them because Renata is a complete force of nature, and her programming is spectacular, and her outreach and passion is just amazing. And so we really want to stay connected with them as well. And so there's this whole host of things that go on. I've been a certified educator for almost 20 years. So teaching in different public and urban and suburban school spaces. My last position, I was a food systems literacy coordinator for Princeton Public Schools. And so we were there laying the foundation and framework for them to build out a unified food systems curriculum for the students. So unifying the garden education program, connecting all the dots between agricultural and food systems education with math, science, literature, the arts. I'm a dancer. That's where I started teaching and dancing professionally. So we connect all of those dots, including the social dots that young people need to touch it at every level. We brought garden produce into the cafeterias. We initially were told we couldn't do that. Turns out that's not true. I worked very closely with the food service director who was there at the time, who was amazing. So we got that produce in. All we literally needed was a sign. So it's something that simple that some people will say, no, you can't do it. And it turns out all you need is a sign saying this was grown in the gardens. And then we got a salad bar into the middle school. So that was really awesome. We did a lot of polling. The students, we had the garden, we reinstituted Garden State on Your Plate. I don't know if you all know about that program that was in Princeton. But we sort of led the charge to bring that back. And at those tastings, we would sit and talk to each of the children. I would sit at each table and talk to the kids and say, well, if you had a salad bar, would you use it? And you get some who say no, but most of them say yes. And then if you ask them, well, what do you want on the bar? They tell you. And so what we did is when we did finally get the bar in, we put what the kids wanted on the bar. And in the very first day of the kids, and the food service director, this was important, found a way to make it part of the free lunch so that it was equitable, because that, otherwise it's a no-go for me. So we needed to make sure that all of the kids could get access to that salad bar. And then it turned out that, contrary to what many of the adults thought, on day one, we had about 40 to 50% of the students who normally get free lunch move from pizza to the salad bar in day one. And so you can imagine the days before kids really knew they didn't need to bring an at-home lunch, which many of them were doing. Unfortunately, you got to have buy-in from the school, and we had issues with people staffing it because the school needed to staff that bar every day. And so, you know, there are always challenges, but that was the framework that we were building. I started Gardening for Life, which is love, inspiration, faith, and empowerment. That was after starting Dance for Life out of our home in Michigan. Thank you. But Gardening for Life was a natural extension of that for me when I became a master gardener. And that continues. And so we're still, even though I'm no longer at Princeton schools, I have continued building out that curriculum with other educators who are specialized in science or mathematics, or my husband's a mathematician. He was a teacher for some time. And, you know, we have other people who are doctorate level science educators who can advise on this curriculum and ensure that everything is aligned. So that's one of the big two current projects. And the bigger one we'll get to as well. By the way, that's just my thing. When it comes to good food raised right, I often put up there making common sense common again, but I decided not to do that. I figured that's probably not the best thing.
There we go.
So this is just a little. Not connected. Okay, that's okay. We can skip the video.
Actually, I think you may.
That's okay. We can skip the video. That's just a video of day one on the farm. By the way, I was born and raised in Detroit, so that's why this is funny. So looking at this video of day one and how I interacted with nature or lack thereof, and how we manage our farm and steward it now. This particular video is me and my daughters and my nephew. We were cleaning out the chicken coop day one, an old chicken coop, and we came across not only a small mouse nest with very brand new baby mice. Yeah, that's not what I thought then. But also the snake that had found it as well.
Oh dear.
So that was the little bit of chaos that was going on, and I have one daughter who's very tenacious who said, I'll just scoop them up and show them to you. And my nephew's like, they're as clean as they're ever going to be, and I just don't care. But, you know, him asking how are you going to butcher the livestock, and I just told him, I said, I'm butchering livestock, I'm just going to be sent out. I do greenery, right? And that, of course, is, I say of course, but it's no longer true because we process about 300 birds on our farm every year. So, and most of those I do myself. The only time I don't do it myself is if it's literally by the time I get to bird number 30 in a batch, I can't physically do it anymore. So we have a person who comes to our farm, Matt Wilkinson, comes to our farm and actually does it on our farm, but we keep our birds on our farm to minimize stress. So anyway, that's why that video, in theory, is funny, at least to me. So we focused on a number of things on our farm. We're on 42 acres, 20 of which is open crop and pasture, 20 of which is forest, and then 2.5 around the property, which as far as I am concerned is still in forest, which is not what I intended when we looked to buy a place. We actually were looking for 8 to 10 acres and wound up with 42. We came across this place on the last day of the last visit of the last day of our trip from Michigan, checking out homes in Jersey. We're across the street. You know, you would walk into a property and you're like, this just isn't it. And we turned around and walked out, and there was a sign across the street, and it wasn't on our list. And the real estate agent said, I don't know why it's there. It's not on my list. And my husband said, well, can we just go up to the door and knock? I can't do that. I'm a real estate agent. I'll get in trouble. He said, you will, but I won't. So he won't. And the rest is kind of history. They had actually put it back on the market after being in Florida for 2 years. Her husband had just become ill, and they wanted another family to farm the land. And they were quite discouraged by the land around it not being utilized, either being left to be unstewarded or having McMansions put in and putting up a wood pile and saying, I'm farmland preserve. So they were very frustrated by that. They wanted a family who was going to come in and actually utilize the land, steward the land, and do well by what they had built and had their family, raised their family on for many years. So we focused on clean land. This particular pasture is 7 acres. There is another one directly on the right. Both of them, when we moved in, they had another farmer who was using land for 2 years, who was using it for corn, wheat, soy, and all the other sort of monoculture commodities. We were told that whatever they sprayed on it was natural. We never were able to get the paperwork for that. So it was very brown and very depleted when we got this property. it wasn't horrific, but it clearly was not stewarded. And so what I discovered, I tell everybody to hold on to their land for a year before they do anything permanent. And so we got 4 chickens. My husband got 2 donkeys against my Thelma and Louise, against what I wanted the first year. They earned their names. And eventually we got more birds, and we had them all in the garden paddock because it was small, it was contained, I was still learning. And what I discovered is that paddock, it's a smaller paddock, became the greenest pasture on the entire property. My background is I double majored with dance and education. I became a master gardener in suburbia. This was all new to me, right? So I started studying, because I'm a little type A, 6 months before we moved. So what I discovered is that, okay, these birds are regenerating this space. So what we started doing is we took all of the coops and we started moving them in a line. This is a bit more scattered, but our broilers in particular, we built out a couple of more of these chicken tractors, and we would run them across this way, all the way down the field, and then turn them around. And what you would see is a swath of green behind the tractors as the grass regrew. So it's that concept of mob and move that people use with cattle when they do it right, is the same concept that we did with the birds. So we have chickens, ducks, geese, and turkeys. Now, although the ducks, turkeys, and the ducks, geese, and turkeys free range, open range, this property, the coops themselves at night were still being moved. And most of the birds, especially the chickens, they drop waste the most at night. And the broilers were moved in those tractors. You can see an electric fence around. You'll get a better look at that. So the idea is that while we do pastured chicken, we also do free range, because we just have this thing. There's something about having them that contained we simply don't like as a philosophy on our farm, even though they have space inside. And so we put an electric fence around. And so all of that space, you're actually getting better usage of that space anyway in terms of regeneration. So this was our first go at pasture and land regeneration before I even knew what it was called, right? I just knew that it just looked better. And nothing was ever put on these fields except lime on the other fields. And the reason we did that is because when we ran the birds over there, it's too close to the wood line, they were annihilated by predators. We still get heavily attacked by predators on this wood line, and because our birds like to use the half-acre pond. We actually stopped losing ducks once we allowed them full free range, because they can die. So what we discovered is people say ducks are dirty, when in truth they're not dirty. First thing they do is they run to the pond for a bath, and then they come back to eat, right? If they're going to get treats, which we usually don't, we feed them at night, but that's what they do. But the reality is we don't lose them to ground predators because it's enough open space for them to see them coming, and we don't lose them to aerial predators because they can get to the pond and die. So the only time they get too far away from the pond is if they're hungry. They're always hungry anyway. But if they're excessively hungry, like somebody didn't give them enough food the night before, then they'll range a bit more. And then you kind of have to keep an eye out. But generally speaking, they have much better protection when they're on that water. So we focus on humane practices. I don't know how to. Let's see if I can change that. I don't know if I can change that. It's going to cut off a little bit. I don't want to stop. Okay, so we have 2 main philosophies that govern the practices on our farm when it comes to our domestic animals. We have the 1 bad day rule, and we have the purple banding rule, both of which I created. The purple banding rule means that for whatever reason an animal is never processed, never sold, they spend their life on our farm, right? Not necessarily good business, I'm told by other farmers, but it's my way of living with the fact that we consume meat, right? And that is directly linked to the 1 bad day rule, which means that because we do open range, we don't clip wings, we don't despur, we don't trim beaks, our donkeys don't wear reins, saddles, or even halters. We try to leave all of the animals intact as best we can. We don't dock tails. We've only castrated our male sheep once, and I will never do it again. That's another story because it lowers their immune system. We had a problem with one pasture, And of the 4 lambs that we lost within 2 weeks, 3 of the 4 that were castrated. And I asked the vet, is it possible that their immune system is damaged by it? And this was considerably time after the actual procedure, and he said, yeah, it's very possible. So at that point I said, never again. Everything on our farm is bred to raise itself. So most of the breeds, with the exception of your meat birds, are breeds that are known to raise their own young. From our sheep to the turkeys, ducks, all that stuff. And because of that, we breed those animals that are exceptionally good at taking care of their young, at free ranging and surviving. For whatever reason, they're very good at what they do. They're very good papas, they're protective, but they're not stupid, you know, all of that kind of stuff. We don't keep bully animals for the most part, except one gander named Checkers, who was purple banded and then became a jerk. And what's interesting is we actually started working with a vegan sanctuary to give him somewhere to go. So if we cannot keep a purple banded animal, we will work with a sanctuary to give him a home somewhere else. And then the day before he was due to be dropped off, my husband and I were like, yeah, we can't do it. So he's still there. And we just decided to try one more time. So he's at his, you know, when we put him inside, he doesn't like other males. And he did actually do enough damage to a female to kill her. And we've lost 2 males due to him in various ways. But he is very protective. He's a very good papa. We don't really want to breed that behavior, but then we discovered the female that he attacked. I realized it was the same one I had caught earlier in the year nibbling on a baby carcass that had been lost to the crows eating the egg shells. And she was nibbling on it, which for a goose, if you don't know, is extremely unusual. And that's when I realized, oh, that's why he doesn't like you, right? Because he's instinctive like that. And more than once, since we decided to try keeping him, he actually drew a pack of coyotes or coy wolves away from the rest of the flock. We thought we lost him, and it turned out he had drawn them into the woods, and the rest had survived. And I kept thinking, we lost them. I can't believe we lost Checkers. And in the middle of the night, I kept hearing calling, and I looked out, and I was like, that's got to be him. And sure enough, my husband was like, oh my God, I'll go and check, right? Like, you're gonna go out in the dark? Okay. So he went out, and he actually found Checkers by the main coop. He had come back, and he was outside the main coop, but of course at risk. So anyway, we were able to get him inside, and he goes on and on with the stories. Like, I've literally watched coyotes chase him at night after I kicked him out of the coop because he kicked all everybody else out. So he's there with it. He's there for life. Anyway, that's our purple banding concept. It's one of those things, our philosophies. When things go wrong, you naturally want to go out and get rid of all of the things, right? Mm-hmm. We lost 80 birds in one night to foxes a few years back. We had just gotten over COVID. I forgot to turn the charger off. And they checked religiously. They went in, they dug under the chicken tractors, they killed 80 birds in one night, all of my profit for that year. And those were broilers and not layers. So the tractors were open on the ground versus having the middle grate and the roost. In those scenarios, your first instinct is, I want to go and kill all of the things, right? In terms of the predators. That's a natural reaction, but part of the thing that we teach is how to create philosophies for your farm and for your land so that in emotional moments you don't do something stupid. So in that scenario, that was when we realized that we're not done people, but you have to learn to steward your land because they had been picking off the birds. The family had grown to 20 strong on our property. We were not stewarding, we were not thinning out the family. They just had free reign. And so that's when we really began to understand stewardship is required, right? It doesn't mean you go out and kill everything, but you have to monitor and manage those numbers. Because the reality is you're feeding them, they're picking them off. So if you're feeding them, you're still interfering, if you want to call it that, with nature. And therefore their numbers are going up, so you have to balance that. But the one bad day rule is if an animal is attacked by a predator and they get badly injured and are very ill and they get TLC from us and they survive, they're purple banded. There's no double jeopardy on our farm, which is why Checkers is still there. Because initially we think he got hit by an ATV, My husband was like, don't put him down, put him on the nest with his girls. If he's there in the morning, he's there. If he's not, then you try it, right? Got there in the morning, he was feet up. I went to reach for him, he bit me like chicken still here. And 3 days later, he was up and walking. So at that point, he was purple banded. All the other nonsense came after. And my philosophy has been kicking me in the butt, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. All right, so this is the pastured free ranging I was talking about that we use to regenerate the land. These are simple Johnson Stovich style food chicken tractor. This is a little more along the Salatin nature, but I designed it, I think, better because it's more functional for a person to get in and out of, easier to manage with the lifted top and the front door. I actually put rails on each side to slide the food in and out. It's just different and a little more functional. But the idea behind the electric fence is that they just get more room. Like you're supposed to be able to put 30 birds in there and move it every day. And you can do it, but if you've got a heart at all, you know what I mean? You can see, and it's a big one. Don't get me wrong. When they're smaller, it's perfectly fine. As they get bigger, you can do it if you're moving the coop, you're moving the tractor every day. But as someone who has a conscience about how we care for our animals, the only way is to let them out, right? You can't leave them open ranging like other birds because they'll get picked off. They're not going to get away from anything. They're too big, they're too fat, they're too slow, and they're too greedy, right? But this, again, this is our way of managing. You can see one of the big roosters, our Copper Moran, out on the outside because they roam there. He's just looking to see if they're, if he can get in and he will. He usually does. They do. They can jump in and out. It's just a matter of whether they want to tussle for the food. But that's kind of how we manage it. This is the wood line between the house and that same field. You can see all the chickens those are our layers. Those are our layers and our heritage birds. We don't do the super high end, 350 egg a year layers. We just don't. We don't need it. We don't desire it. We don't like that the natural breeding instinct is bred out of them. So we don't use them. Right. We are seed growers. We specialize, like I said, in culturally relevant seeds. So this is actually a Nigerian Lagos spinach, where we are preserving the seed. Those leaves are used like spinach, but it's not true spinach by phenotype. That one is actually an elephant head, another amaranth, an elephant head amaranth, which is a grain amaranth. They use those leaves too. We do fresh okra, which is very hard to find in grocery stores. So we, culturally relevant food. Culturally relevant food are literally those things that are particularly relevant to any given culture. So things like collards, turnips. When people think that you get collards in the store, it's not just one variety. There are 60 varieties of collards in different colors, purples, blues, yellows. It's beautiful. But the idea is that you get that one because that was the one that the big commercial folks use because it's the most disease resistant, it's the most pest resistant, it's a very thick, it's the Georgia collard is what it is. It was the traditional one used in the South, so that's the one you always see in the store because that's what people are used to looking at. But the truth is, there's 60 different varieties. We actually at Ujamaa created the Ultra Cross, which has huge biodiversity. It's a cross of about 16 collards. And the biodiversity when you plant that seed is outrageously beautiful. And so we have an Ultra Cross collard, we have an Ultra Cross okra, and I am working on an Ultra Cross sorghum, which is like the climate crop. We'll talk about that too. That's just I believe that's a pak choi. But that's also square foot gardening. That's the method that I have been teaching for 20 some years.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Barefoot?
Square foot gardening.
Square foot. I'm like, what?
I do that too because I dance in my garden. Yeah, the barefoot garden. Yeah. Those are just potatoes. So that method is by Mel Bartholomew. Anybody familiar with that book? The Square Foot Gardening book. His descendants are still revamping it. Every couple years they come out with a new one. I have the original, the second edition. I've been using it for 20 years. I keep using it. I bought the new ones because I'm interested and I'm sure there's some newfangled stuff. You don't have to have it. The old one will do just fine because the man was brilliant. But it's the method that I teach all new beginners. because it's the least, it's high intensity growing in small spaces. And the weeding in a typical suburban garden, I did 20 minutes a week. That was it. Which is what most beginners need, because if they overwhelm themselves, they will hate it.
Yeah.
So we try to keep them in that method and then expand later. It's just garlic. That first thing I ever learned to grow. So we do a lot of garlic. This is just, you know, these are two of our best mamas. So even when we get new chicks in, we either let them hatch their own, or we'll get new chicks and we actually put them under new mamas. Because it's less work for me, and because it helps me to know if they're still good moms, or if they're done, or if young ones are coming in and they're pretending they want to sit. It's all about sustainability, right? And so this isolation is actually because it introduces them to the rest of the flock so that they're constantly around the flock without having to worry about the roosters for the first 3 days. After 3 days, you can let them out with everybody else. They'll go back in here by themselves because it's more accessible than climbing the ramp. And this is sorghum, which is the ultimate climate crop of our time. Does anybody know what sorghum is? Anybody heard of it?
Yes.
All right, so the other name for that here in the States is Milo. Pretty much everywhere in the rest of the world eats sorghum, other than the US and parts of the West. But even in most other parts of the West, they also eat sorghum. It is a high protein grain. You have grain varieties, you have sugar varieties, and you have broom varieties, as well as forage sorghum, which is mostly focused on the leaves. So sorghum is an African crop. It grows like corn, and at the top of it you get these beautiful huge heads of seeds. It's very high protein. It's naturally gluten-free. The cane is used like sugar cane. It's pressed like sugar cane. The leaves are dried by a number of ethnic groups. They're dried and used for tea, but they're also cooked like spinach. The red varieties, the dye from the red varieties is used for dyeing clothing, and the fiber from the cane is used for clothing and basketry. What makes this the ultimate crop is that this variety is only in this location because this is a special variety that I'm breeding, but all of our other sorghum is out on the far field with no irrigation. There's none, it's at zero. It grows readily. It's just unbelievable in terms of the drought, the big drought that we had. My sorghum was fine. The only damage I had from the sorghum was from the deer. Like the water was not by it. It has a long, deep taproot. And not only does it have a deep taproot, but it's a nitrogen fixer.
Wow.
So, and right, there's more. My animals, all of them eat the grain. The grain, when you cook it like you do rice. It just tastes like a chewy rice, and it absorbs all the flavors of whatever you're cooking like rice does. Each of the different varieties has a slightly different flavor, which is beautiful too, because you get different options. The geese will nibble the leaves when they're young. The sheep prefer the leaves when they're young or dried, but they will eat them at any time. Like I said, everybody will eat the grain. The donkeys will eat the leaves, the grain, and the stalks, which are sweet. So they all love sweet stuff. Or you can press the cane for sorghum syrup. You do sorghum juice, which you can mix with seltzer and have a soft drink. There are people, Ujama is working on a sorghum beer. And you can also press it, boil it down for sorghum syrup, which is healthier than sugar. And the sugar itself is healthier.
Is it a perennial?
We are working. M61 we're working on it being perennial. We know that it has been biennial. So Experimental Farm Network, which is one of our main partners of Ujama, has an M61 sorghum that I just bought quite a bit of. So I started planting it last year. We're going to see if it's a true perennial. They're calling it a perennial, but in the industry, we know it's not. We don't think it's quite there yet. It's not proven yet. It's only been biennial so far. So we're going to continue finding out if we can make it by a perennial. Mostly, these are hot crop annuals like corn. They're long season. They do have some that are short season, shorter season. Most of them are going to be anywhere from 90 to 120 days. So you always gonna, in this area, have to start them inside. Well, that's not true. That's not true. We did plant a lot outdoors. The 90-day varieties, obviously you can get planted outdoors, 90 to 100, maybe 110 if you're careful. But the longer, the 120s, you have to start indoors. The other reason I'm now doing all of them indoors is because the voles like them too. The seed. And so you'll get a lot that comes up, but you'll also lose some to critters. They're planted about an inch deep, inch and a half, so the birds don't tend to get them, but the voles will.
Can you plant them in the high tunnel? And
Yes.
extend the season or,
Absolutely.
or even grow
Absolutely.
them year round
Thank you.
in this area? Sorry.
Apple juice,
I'm-
water, or
Water, please. I'm sorry, I'm not sick, I promise. The
Okay.
Canadian smoke that came down, I've been coughing, I get set off every now and then since the smoke came down. I don't know why, the doctors don't know why, we just don't. So, but yes, you can put it in a high tunnel, thank you so much.
There you go.
I also am working on shorter varieties, like Dorado and Texacoa. Dorado is a 4-foot variety, and I like those because, actually we're growing a lot of that out, so we'll actually be selling it at the end of this year as a part of our new seed shop. But we're doing that because we're focused on varieties that will be better for homestead level and suburban level. If you get something like Della that grows 12 feet, it's beautiful. It's hugely productive. Unless you want to take a machete, which is what we did down in Maryland. We went down to Ujama Field, Taman down there, and we had about 20 of us doing an acre field, and we never finished it because they're so big. By the time you harvest them, you got to get them on trailers and stuff. So I'm focusing on white and tan, high protein varieties, and varieties that are shorter in stature that someone can come through with some hedge clippers or pruners, cut the head off, dry them. They should already be dry when you cut them off. That's a growth issue. And then, take them inside without a lot of hoo-ha.
Do they flower? Are they good for bees? And if not, what are the pollinators?
They do flower, but they're largely self-pollinating. The isolation distance for producing seed is 100 to 150 feet.
Okay.
So they're largely self-pollinating. The bags that are on there for the birds and the mice.
Oh, okay.
Those are nylon bags. You can see here, I don't know if you can see, but they're very green. You can actually cook them at this green stage. In India, they call it punk. So they actually cook it. This is called the milk stage. So you actually can cook it down, and it's a beautiful, beautiful dish. You can cook it all these phases. They have popping sorghums that pop like popcorn. So I mean, this is where I'm living right now is sorghum, right? Because I just think it's one of those things that is sorely underutilized. And as a farmer, it is an incredibly valuable crop because it has so much stacking ability. So by the time you sell the seeds, I can feed my animals, I can feed my family, a protein-rich, grain, and then all the leaves that can be eaten by like all of the things, right? And then you can also go through. I let my sheep in here. I can cut the tops, and they'll come through and finish it for me.
Is it, is sorrel?
Sorghum. No. Sorrel is a totally different thing.
It's not in the same family?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Sorrel is a hibiscus.
Oh, okay.
Totally different. So these are just some of the crops. This particular turnip green, it has been in my family for almost 100 years. We lost it for about 10 or 15 years. One of the things Ujama does is help people to find and preserve their own seed stories and seed heritage from their own families. and that is mine. So it was a big to-do when we finally found it. Presented it for my grandmother's 90th birthday to 250 family members. And we now have 3 companies that will be selling it in her name.
Oh.
So that would be Gertrude's Turnip. So if you see that in Southern Exposure or Ujama or Experimental Farm Network or So True, you'll know where it came from. And those are Peruvian peppers up top to the right. Just more seed. These are African peas. They call them cow peas, but we don't call them that anymore. We call them African peas or Southern peas because that's where they're from. And the rest of the world eats them, not just the cows. So the African peas have become very, very popular. And there's so many varieties, it's just insane. Again, that's the Lago spinach. That is, that looks like the callaloo. There's another amaranth, the Jamaican callaloo. Peruvian peppers. This is actually one of our tractors that we realized was too heavy to move. I said, well, we'll just keep it and make it, it plenty of compost in it, so we just figured we just keep it from the deer. That's our duck flock, so you can see that we focus on making sure that those animals, this chicken thought he was a duck. He literally would live with the ducks. But that didn't bode well for him in the end of the day. But this particular pond is a half-acre pond that we also steward. It's got snapping turtles in it, which was actually picking off the ducks and one of the bobcats. My husband, they found a 10-pounder. And they put it back in, not realizing that it could do damage. And so I told our hunter, I was like, can you go and get it? He was like, what do you want to do with it? I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to kill it. I just want to move it, right? He went in and pulled out one that was 25 pounds.
Oh.
I don't know how he did it. I don't want to know. I'm never going to do it. But that's how we found out what was really in there. That 10-pounder from 2.5 years ago is still in there somewhere, so I don't swim in that pond. But the ducks seem to be fine when they have their babies. The unfortunate thing is we do have to isolate them because they will take the babies on the pond. The geese, on the other hand, are crazy smart. They don't take their babies on the pond until they're much bigger. They take them all around the farm, and it's like everything the light touches. They take their babies around and tell them it's theirs. That's my mom and our old car. The reason I show this one is because most people don't have a huge farm. And so what we teach people to do is to create abundance in their own space. And my mom was like, yeah, I'll take a photo. So this was some time ago. But you can see with the square foot gardening how abundant that is, especially when you include the trellises on the north sides. And you can feed a family of 4 for a season out of a 4x4 box. It does not even have to be anywhere close to this big, right? My brother's in Los Angeles with a windowsill, and I make him grow. That's just a 4x4 box, and you've got cucumbers and other things that would be planted underneath, pots, all sorts of stuff that can be done. And that's my little one who's not so little anymore, teaching young people about how to interact with nature in general, animals and such. One thing I found is true is that animals will respond to your nature. Right? If you teach children to be caring and respectful of nature, they will never forget that. Whether they're on a farm or whether they're visiting a garden, all of those things are possible. She's now 16. She's the one who fractured her finger. We also focus on a lot of conservation classes on the farm, reducing carbon footprint. We actually got rid of this ATV last year and a half ago. We now hoof it. We do have a truck for when we need it. But for the most part, we do a lot more walking on the property. And then, of course, we talked about the land regeneration. Our woodland, we do steward. We have a 10-year plan for it, but we've not really gotten as into that as we would like. We steward it in terms of making sure we are aware of what invasives, if any, are there, where they are keeping track of their growth, so that when we can get in to get them out, we were talking about the grapevine. We know that we have some grapevine in one area, Japanese wineberry and others. Very hard to pull that out because it tastes so good. But again, stewarding, right? It's about stewarding and pulling it out so that it doesn't become a problem and you can keep it in one area. This is just different methods of teaching people how to grow without tilling or with very little till. We do community days. Again, the heritage turkeys, because they will raise their own. They are a pain in the butt, but it's just better in a vast number of ways. Looking at the preserve, this is the kind of thing I keep seeing, is where you have various things going on, but you can actually walk people through and hold these kinds of conversations in classes with the young people. The other thing is that the other big project that we have is land access and training. The Healing Waters land access project on our farm, we're turning over 3 acres for new and beginning farmers to teach them, with a focus on BIPOC farmers, to teach them how to farm if they want to learn, to help them have their own business. We have 4 organizations and 2 universities that are in this project. And it really is about not only, you can see the donkeys have nothing on. That's Louise, that's Thelma. And that's Sandy, that's our big mama. I didn't know sheep would chase off foxes, but I watched her get between, we were weaning her lamb in the stable over there, and he was crying, and I looked up from the garden, and she was standing still, and I always watch her body language because she watches everything. And I realized it drew a big fox out. And before I could get there, she got the rest of the girls behind her and they chased it off. And I was like, oh, that's dope. You're a purple bandit. And she's also a foundation youth. She's one of our 2 foundation youths. And the only one left. We lost the first and a couple of others to coyote. That's when we realized we had coy wolves and not just coyotes. Because we have 2 packs that roam our property. So again, it's stewardship, even though what you really want to do is like clear the decks because you got kids. We've had instances. I've had the dogs hunted while I was with them 2-3 times. And so, and we've had it where the first time we realized, other than this particular attack, we knew we had coyotes because my older daughter had gone to the chicken coop to feed the chickens before school, and I didn't go with her. I have long story. I have osteoarthritis, and so there are times where I can get to the point where I can't walk. And it's just from dancing on hard surfaces and not caring for my body, but what will happen is that I'll end up with a walking stick if I don't take care of myself. And so I hadn't gone with her, and she was taking too long, and I'm like, well, the rule is, if you see anything, put yourself in the coop because you know Mama's coming. Even if I'm limping, I'm going to get there, right? So I start making my way there, and she's coming out of the gate, and she's like, get in the car, get in the car, get in the car. And she's 12, and I told her, whatever it is, we're not going to run, right? But it turned out that she had 3 or 4 coyotes come into that paddock while she was in there feeding the chickens. And they spotted her. It was foggy, so they may not have known she was there. They came in, they turned around, saw her, and went out. But she was like, Mom, I didn't hear them jump the fence. So, which she didn't know at that time that you probably wouldn't because they're agile. So she put herself in the coop. And I asked her, why didn't you stay in the coop? That's the rule. Besides the fact that she's 12 and she's a girl. But she goes, oh, well, I had to go to school. I have stuff to do. This is the tenacious one. And but what we did is we did put bells, heavy bells, in various places on the farm so that they could ring if anything happens. So that was when we realized that, okay, this could really be a danger. How do we steward this land in a way that is focused on conservation, but also focused on stewardship and family safety, right? Totally off topic. I got started with Sandy. But anyway, so the Land Access Project, we focus on training, access to land, which is a huge barrier for many folks coming into farming. And then the idea is at the end of a 2 to 5 year period, we help them to find their own land in order to farm effectively, sustainably, and with regeneration and conservation in mind. This particular program, we really started developing about 2 years ago, and it's really just now taking full swing, so we are opening up more land for this project this year. So we're breaking ground this year. We also have another landowner who is now partnering with us. She has 100 acres, and she's decided to take a number of those acres and do the same thing. She will be opening that land up to new and beginning BIPOC farmers to teach them along the same lines that we are doing. So our hope is to get more landowners to take part in this because many of them are retiring. They're baby boomers. And in their day and age, they were told, go big or go home. So the average farm is the average small farm is 256 acres. what young person do you know who can afford that, especially in somewhere like New Jersey?
Yeah.
Right? I don't care what color you are, that's steep. So the idea behind this project is also much bigger than that. The idea is that you get farmers who are retiring, who want people to farm their land, to turn around and teach the people who are coming in, who are new farmers, in addition to organizations teaching. And that way, when they get ready to retire, you now have relationships that are built where they know this person's gonna come in, they're gonna farm their land. I know the business plan is gonna work because I taught it to him, right? And what happens is you then have a possibility for owner financing. That is how we got our farm. We had no intention of having a 42-acre farm. But the owners wanted someone to farm that land. They knew that I was a master gardener. They knew by the conversation I had been studying ahead of time that I would find good support. And they did owner financing. So this is a bigger way to change the food system than it initially seems. It's much broader. And the more landowners that we can get to take part in this, we now are changing the food system, one small farm at a time. We are changing the environment by teaching conservation and stewardship. We're pulling people out of the monoculture system, and we are preventing big ag and development from coming in and taking over these 250-acre farms and developing them, or putting monoculture crops back on them that's going to kill our biodiversity and our wildlife. So while I started here, the actual big picture is much, much broader. And that's just Louise. Sometimes she loves me, sometimes she doesn't. Can't tell if she's going to kiss me or bite me. But she's a sweetheart. All right, so other things you can do as an organization in creating natural communal spaces. The three great connectors that I teach are food, music, and dance. So obviously I have a bias, right? But the truth is, when any of those three things are good enough, the isms stop, even if temporarily. So the concept is, if the music is good enough, everybody's dancing. If the food is good enough, everyone's eating. And if you go to sit down at a table and break bread with somebody, it's very hard to be angry. And believe it or not, I learned that from my husband's ex-wife. Yeah. The first time I met her, I made lunch. We sat down, she asked me if I had made, she was like Mother Earth incarnate. And she wasn't sure how she felt about me. And she said, "Did you make this soup?" I said, "No, I got it out of Campbell's can." And we started laughing. And that was 26 years ago. I met my husband 26 years ago, so that was like 24 years ago. Last time I saw her, we were breaking bread in a restaurant. We aren't the best of friends. We're never going to be. But we were able to have conversations about our children that we have been raising for so long, right? Simple concept, applied in different scenarios over the years, I found still works. So that's one of the main things, is if you can incorporate any of those three things into an event that you're doing, into a space, you now have a place where people can break bread and have the hard conversations. The number of political conversations I've had over breaking bread is insane, where we otherwise would not have been able to do that, right? Pressure-free zones, like you were saying, the community days. We have the Heritage Gardening Club on our farm. This is a club where, again, it kind of started with the Ujamaa thing, where people can't find their traditional foods in grocery stores, so we grow them together. If they don't know how, I teach them. And we don't talk business. We don't talk business, we don't talk shop. It wasn't until about 2 months in before I realized I had EDs and school superintendents and everything else in that group, because they needed the pressure-free space, right? And so even though we now know who they are, we still keep it pressure-free. And those that develop friendships outside of that, yes, they have other connections now. But having those pressure-free zones is super important to build your organization in your space, your communal spaces. And then having it accessible for people who have disabilities. Our farm, the main farmer besides myself, is in a wheelchair, and he gets more work done than most people who come to my farm with 2 working legs. He also is just now taking over our Caribbean crops for our restaurants, the local restaurants that we want to engage. And so we've actually widened our aisles over the past 2 years because we valued him so much. We wanted to, most people keep him, sort of 18 inches. our aisles are now 30 inches. And we'll continue doing that. Because we also have people come in who have autism or who have whatever, and we create spaces and, more importantly, a culture that allows them in without feeling like they're out of place. I have a nephew who is certified genius, and he has Asperger's, and he will come in and lay on the ground to examine the sweet potato roots and how they develop and how they grow. And I've had workers look like, I got stuff to do. But I've created a culture where they will sit back and say, I'll work somewhere else till you're done, right? That culture of acceptance and patience is super important, because that same nephew will turn around and go design something based on that root system that now benefits your farm or somebody else. So giving that space is super important. This is just a general concept of looking at a compost cycle that is fully connected to the community. So when you look at, this was actually one that I developed for Princeton University, but the idea is that you take your compost from your cafeteria food waste, your other compost areas around the campus, and you partner with other groups in the community, such as their own seed farm, to take that compost, other community gardens and farms, and the Princeton school, it says P, but the Princeton public school gardens, and you partner to filter that out or to bring it in depending on what it is you're doing. But that's a huge, or landscaping uncontaminated, because that's a pet peeve of mine. When people go and people put all sorts of stuff on their trees and they're like, you want wood chips dumped? No, I don't, but thank you. Because you can't control that. So we get wood chips dumped when it's from our land. But depending on what you're doing, that might not be as big of an issue. So if you're, it depends on what you're doing. So that's just some general conversations about educating the community and making impactful partnerships.
How big is your composting site?
We actually have piles in the sheep field. With any luck, then again, I started to say we'll get a grant, but Lord have mercy. We got hit very hard, like a lot of other farmers where the grants are concerned. We worked very hard to get about $300,000 in grants, and we now have 200 of that frozen, including our high tunnels, our fences, which have just been canceled, and everything else. So, whole nother story. But the compost piles are in the sheep fields, and we literally will run that by tractor to wherever we want it to go. We'll let it break down if we need it in an immediate space. But what we try to do in our low-till, no-till is we'll take a new area, we'll put down fresh manure and or compost, and then we tarp it. So that's a lot better, and we'll leave that for the fall through the winter, and in spring it's ready to plant, more or less. If it's pasture that's never been broken in, sometimes you do have to till it. People say, oh, no-till, but the truth is most of those people were tilling for years before they got into no-till. So the ground's already been broken, so it's easy to say. We tried that. We tried the not tilling at all, but when you hit that pasture grass, you do tend to need to till that one time, then you compost it, you let it settle, and then you don't do it again, or you use a rotary plow that's going to do that top 12 inches and be done. So we're not continuing to break up the pan, the soil pan, and create compaction. I would love to talk about the idea of raised community garden beds. Perhaps we talked about at one point about having each area be a different ethnicity or from a different community, so that you've got, maybe you've got an Italian community that wants to have, produce from their particular culture, and you've got, a Ghanaian or Caribbean. Many of their countries have very similar culturally relevant foods, right? Or if you have people from other places. Right now we preserve, like I said, seed from war-torn areas. So the Zaria sunflower I've been growing for 3 or 4 years. Ujamaa passed out 10 seeds to 3 farmers each. 2 of them lost their crops, and we were able to save ours. That's why we give them to 3 different farmers. We grew it out to 3 or 4 pounds. We shared it out. We grew it out to 10 pounds the next year. And now those folks, what we do is we sell it through Ujama, we sell it through Experimental Farm Network, and the remainder of it is rematriated to the people of the Ukraine when the war is over. The reason we do that, and we're doing that with Palestinian seed, with traditional Jewish seed. I have stuff from Germany, Kenya, a lot of stuff from Yemen, all over the world, right? Germany. The reason we do that is because in these wars, the farmers are burned out first. I don't care what side you're on, they get burned out first because they provide the food. And so what happens is, for example, the Zaria sunflower, they tell you the highest oil content is 40, theirs is 45. That's why it's their national flower. It's why it's one of their biggest exports. This enables the farmers to be able to restart. And so we do a lot of seed from around the world that way. So the idea of having community beds where you can take part in that kind of preservation is insanely powerful. And as far as I'm concerned, growing food is an act of resistance. I just think it is. The idea of preserving seed even more so. So if you think about raised garden beds, you could do a regular common community garden where you've got a bunch of different people have different beds, right? Where you could take that concept and say, we got beds from this area of the world, beds from that area of the world. We're preserving seed here, and let the people of those communities preserve that seed and grow the food that they traditionally would eat, right? We get a lot of seed from indigenous communities that are at risk of losing it because of environmental pollution and environmental justice issues. Some of that seed, they are like, this is sacred, we don't want it sold. And we don't sell it, we bank it. We preserve it for them, every now and then we grow it out, and they can come and get it whenever they want. So these are all different concepts that you can do rather than just a traditional, somebody goes and pays some money and keeps a garden somewhere other than their house. It's great, that's a wonderful, powerful community building tool. Imagine if you could do a lot more than that, right? So I would love to hear more about what you guys are thinking you might want to do, having heard some of the stuff that we do, and just have an open conversation about your thoughts and see if I can provide any value to that. I'm going to stop because I will talk forever. I love this subject.
All right, well, I would like to actually open this up for questions.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I would really like to know who here is actually here in part because they're interested in community gardens here. Okay, all righty. Can I ask, there's a sign-in sheet that went around. Can we send it around again and put like an asterisk or a CG next to your name so that we know who you actually are?
Yeah.
Because this is one of those things where we are talking potentially about having gardens over there on the seed beds. But there's, some administrative issues. It's DNR Canal State Park. We don't have water over there. We have to get someplace where you can actually drive your car in there. So that people can, don't actually have to walk down from the post office to their garden, through the, et cetera, et cetera. But,
Yeah, I mean, and let me just add a couple of things. One, our average grower for Ujama is on a 1/4 acre or less. It does not require much space. In the space you can grow a 50-cent carrot, you can grow enough seed to create 30 to 40 packs of seed at $4 each. That's another revenue stream. If you wanted to do that and then turn around and donate it somewhere or whatever you wanted to do, you could turn around and use that to support a food pantry or whatever it is. There's also the idea of putting native edibles on the property so that you're staying within conservation, but you allow the gleaners like rolling harvest to come in during when that food is mature, whether it's pawpaws or berries or whatever, allow them to come in and glean those things and feed your community. So that's another idea as well.
all right.
Yes. I have a guest and I live elsewhere, but I am part of certain organizations that do have or have had community gardens. So I just wanted to point out, one of the problems that we had in the community garden that we had upstate was the people that were invited to come, the community was invited to come and take a plot with the understanding that it would only be organic, but they were found to be using chemicals. So that was a problem. And they couldn't stop it, so they had to shut it down. Another one is, I live up north, and some of the parks have created garden beds in them, and they do sell a plot for the season to the residents of the town, and that's been very successful also. So there, just the two things that happen. Not that I'm not interested, but I've been parts of groups that have done this, and it is a community building. But when you're talking about doing businesses like collecting the seeds and everything, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful concept. And compost is definitely a big part of that. So I was really pleased to see that chart with the compost in the middle.
Right in the middle, yes.
It's a big thing, and I'll tell you, when it comes to people using chemicals, I'm a little harsh, right? My attitude when it comes to that is you let them know up front, there's immediate dismissal. There's no refund, and there's immediate dismissal if this is found to be the case. And you do have to have things like cameras up. It's just part of, kind of the nature of it. You know, we had a group of folks come to our farm. It was all about learning about, black farms up and down the Northeast, and they were there to help do some work on the farm and all of that. And I explained that a lot of people do it, but we don't give our chickens chicken, right?
You don't give them.
We don't give our chickens chicken. People are like, oh, all vegetarian feed. I'm like, are they free range? Because then they're not vegetarian. But a lot of farmers don't mind because chickens will eat it. But my thing is, I have a thing about it. So we might, for our own flocks, not for the flocks we sell, for our own flocks, we will give our turkeys residual chicken meat from the kitchen. We will give our chickens residual duck meat, right? We don't give our chickens chicken, we don't give our turkeys turkey, and we don't give our ducks duck, right? And we don't give our geese any meat. And again, this is just talking about our flock for our home and our friends who are perfectly comfortable with this. Organic's a whole nother, we are certified organic. That's a whole other conversation about the fact that you can't even give them kitchen waste at all. No, you can't. You cannot give organic birds any kitchen waste whatsoever. They can have organic garden waste, fresh stuff from the garden, which we do a lot of, but you can't give them anything from your kitchen. So we do, but we don't believe in waste. So our home flock of birds, they get whatever we need. But we had someone in this tour who disagreed. And we had lunch, and I found out 4 weeks later, the woman called me and said, I'm really sorry, but we found out that someone decided to walk half a field over with their plate and give your chickens chicken. And it turned out that it was our home flock and not the broilers. But still, I mean, people, it's a respect. And so that is why you do have to have camera. Of course, my question was why it took so long to tell me that, but but when it comes to having people on your property, and whether it's a homestead, farmstead, or a preserve, you have to have cameras and you have to have strict rules, and anybody that can't abide by those doesn't understand your point and purpose, and they don't need to be there. Full stop. No questions, no, I'm sorry, can I? Yeah, no. Because it's the only way that you're going to get everyone to respect what it is you're trying to do. That's just my feeling.
Yeah, and you can't really say, okay, well, this is going to be organic.
And
that's not going to be organic.
And you're a conservation group, like, if you come to a preserve and you don't understand that concept, you might need education somewhere else for a while, and maybe the next preserve that you go to, you'll figure that out. And so, yeah, that education first, and then Because you have to respect everybody there.
Inspect what you expect.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And the other successful thing was raised beds for the seniors and people that
Yep.
may be in wheelchairs.
Yeah. ADA friendly, not compliant, that's a whole other ball of wax, but ADA friendly. ADA friendly is very possible.
What's the difference? ADA friendly and ADA compliant?
ADA compliant, when you look at the ADA policies and all of the things that you have to do to be ADA compliant, American Disabilities Act. So, you know, your ramps have to be a certain width. You're in a certain height at a different, you know, everything is very, very precise. The table height has to be precise. Everything, there's a whole manual of regulations to be ADA compliant, to have that little symbol that says ADA, right? I'm a small farm. I don't have the bandwidth or the finances to do all of those things. What we do is we created a medicinal garden, for example. You can get all the way around that medicinal garden. It has an entrance and an exit under arbors, and there's wood chips on the inside and solid grass on the outside. So you can get a wheelchair all the way around. He goes all the way around, no problem whatsoever.
On grass?
Yeah, because it's flat enough. Over the dip to get there, we put down boards. Now, we were being ADA compliant, it would have to be a certain kind of wood, certain kind of height, certain angle to the boards, all of that stuff, which is great. I don't have the time or the capacity to comply with everything, right? And then every entrance has to be, it can't be just a few of them. Every entrance has to be the same in terms of accessibility, or you have to have another entrance that is totally accessible. Does that make sense? And it takes time, it takes money, it takes labor that I don't have. So what I try to do is to be ADA friendly so that yes, you can, it is a farm. It is a working farm. So yes, you can get in there, you can dig, you can plant, you can harvest, you can do all of these things. The aisles we started when we moving it up to 24, we discovered that the wheelchair is 24, so he still ends up on the soil, so we need to open it to 30, right? 30 inches will get you in there. Now, do I have the exact doors to get it open and all? I do not. What I do have is a guy who's able to take the net, unhook it, and go in and do what he needs to do, right? Somebody can be pushed onto the ground cover because it's all ground covered in that area. Is ground cover sufficient for ADA compliancy? Probably not, but it's what I have. And so that is why I say ADA friendly. And more important, I'm more focused on the culture of being ADA friendly than I am the exact measurements of compliance. Can a child with autism or other differences come in and feel comfortable? Can they come in and pick off a plant and maybe pull it too hard without me having a conniption, right? So the answer is yes, because I'm not going to create a space that they can go into that's going to cause me to have a conniption because they pulled the plant out, and I have had people do that. And they were not even needing the ADA part, right? They think harvesting is pulling the whole plant. So that kind of stuff's gonna happen. And you have to have spaces and create a culture where it's not the end of the world. Yeah, it's an educational space. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right. Other questions? I would like to actually ask you, I have a vegetable bed that is in need of rejuvenation.
Mm-hmm. Soil or the bed itself?
The soil.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to know, do you have a standard?
Yep.
If you're not dragging chickens through your yard, which I'm not, but she is.
Yeah, my birds come in and clean up the gardens at the end of the year.
Yeah.
The sheep too. I let everybody in. I'm a huge fan of Mel's Mix. Mel's Square Foot Gardening.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's 1/3 horticultural vermiculite. I know there's controversial. It's 1/3 horticultural vermiculite. It's 1/3 peat, and it's 1/3 compost.
Yep, okay.
The compost, if you're going to buy bags, you want to buy at least 5 different kinds, because what happens is that each of those companies will get the residuals from one industry. So it's often mushroom compost, manure compost, forest product compost, but what we really need to have a rich microbial life is all of it. And so that's why the 5 different brands. And you also want to make sure that it is ideally OMRI or some other, PCO certified, because what will happen is that they'll say organic and natural. And you're thinking, oh, it's organic and natural. And what they really mean is organic and natural, right? And that natural part can mean anything. And so it's better if you're really trying to go organic, to try to go for that OMRI listed, or to get from a source where you know for a fact where it's coming from. So go to a farm or somewhere where you know where it's coming from. I'm all about know your farmer. Because if you know your farmer, you don't have to rely on labels.
Act as a sort, like if she wanted to come and pick up some compost for her bed, could she come to you and get it?
On or off the record? Legally, you are supposed to be permitted to sell compost. Are there a lot of farms who will say, bring your own bag and pay $5 and take the compost? Yes. There's a lot of that goes on. That's all I have to say about that.
Okay, hold that. All right.
But if you had compost and wanted to just give it away, you can do that.
You can do that.
We're gonna move some compost piles out of the May garden, and we're gonna need to empty some compost, and I can say probably at least 1 to 3 cubic yards that if
And she
you wanna
can
come
donate
get
if she
it,
wants to.
you can have it,
Oh,
because it would be something I don't have to move.
oh,
There you go.
okay, but it'd be something that we had to move?
You would, yeah,
You
I
would
would
have
say,
to-
sometimes people bring,
Yeah.
the small garbage cans.
Yeah,
I can't do that, so I do the Homer buckets.
uh-huh,
And, yeah, because I got notified that put your money where your mouth is. You said you were going to help us. We need this done. So in March, they're gonna do that. So I'll be in touch with you.
please do,
But I think you
yeah.
can definitely have some compost from us.
Okay, okay.
That's awesome.
Because we've got some new raised beds that are going in as another Eagle Scout project up in the field next to Hamsika's plot.
Yeah.
Her twin brother is putting in raised beds for native shrubs next
Nice.
door.
Nice.
The only problem is Hamsika is through with her project. His hasn't started yet. And they age out on April 23rd.
Oh dear.
So, if there's anybody that would like to help with construction, we got lots of fun things going on. Oh, this was fabulous. I would really love to be able to continue this discussion, but I'm mindful of the fact that people have to go home and get on with their lives. But I would really like to just keep on going, but we can't. So, our next event is going to be probably helping to build raised beds, and I'll send around emails on that. And there will be a Welcome Spring or Signs of Spring walk coming up some one of these days soon, because there's a lot of signs
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I could use one right about now. It was bitter, that wind out there, the animals